Hi, I'm Martin Rust with the Security and Policy Institute for Professional Development here at the University of Ottawa. My guest today is Scott Gilmore, a former diplomat and current columnist with Maclean's Magazine. I wanted to ask you a little bit about geopolitics, and surely as we follow the news today, more and more of the things that happen around the world affect policy here in Canada and affect policymakers here in Canada. What are some of the biggest issues you see today?
Well, the biggest issue that I see today that I feel that is not getting the attention it deserves is the shift to the center of gravity for the global economy. In the 1800s, it was very much in Europe. It began to gradually creep east, and now what we're seeing with the growth of frontier economies, particularly in Africa, that the world is changing very, very rapidly in terms of where goods are made, where money flows, and Canadian government and its policymakers and its companies and even its people aren't paying attention to that.
What kind of opportunities do you see for Canadian companies, first of all, and then for the Canadian government?
Well, for Canadian companies, it's often been said that we are a trade-dependent nation, not a trading nation, which means that we usually wait for people to come to us and buy our things, and we don't go out and sell them. And that's something I see every day when I'm overseas in places like Burma or Nigeria or Liberia. Lots of international businesses are there. Almost none of them are Canadians, even in the oil patch or in the resource sector, which I find to be astounding. So the very first thing, opportunity for Canadian businesses or challenge for Canadian businesses is just to get out of Pearson International. Get overseas, take advantage of the spectacular multicultural assets that we have in this country, particularly linguistically, to hire people, whether they have a Nigerian background or a Burmese background, and get out there and see how the world is changing. And the same could be said for Canadian policymakers. For too long, we have maintained massive embassies in places like Washington and Delhi and Europe, and very, very thin coverage in places like Nigeria and Ghana and Burma. In fact, we didn't open up an embassy in Burma until just about a year ago, which is absolutely astounding. A country of 80 million people situated between two of the world's largest economies. Whether it's the issues of illegal trade, arms trading, ethnic problems, migration, it's a critical country by almost every filter, and yet we have very tiny embassies there. So we need to change that. We need to recognize that the world is not just Brussels and Washington and Beijing, that it's also Abuja and Mogadishu.
I think we have all sort of long held to the view that we have this great international reputation as Canadians. It's something that we've taken a lot of pride in. Certainly politicians over the years have taken a lot of pride in it. Is that true, or do you see it on the decline? Is it something that is as widespread as we'd like to think it is?
Yeah. It's definitely not on the decline. Regardless of what the government is in power, the opposition always claims that we've passed our glory days. I think that they are imagining a glory days that possibly didn't necessarily exist, and they're discounting the impact that we're having globally right now. And don't just take my word for it. If you take a look at almost any indice, whether it's brand reputation or the BBC World Surveys that go on, or the Pew Research Group, Canada's reputation in the world is in the top 5, and has been consistently for the last decade. But having a good reputation and doing something with it are two entirely different things, and I think that's where we fall down.
So if you're a Canadian enterprise, and I'm thinking of the defense and security sector, for instance, so there isn't much of a domestic market for your products or services in that sector, so you have to sell globally. And yet, if I'm taking your comments correctly, we're not doing as great a job at that as we should. What are some of the things we could be doing to improve that?
Well, it's very simple things. It's literally going to the airport and flying to these markets. It is astounding when I'm on the ground in these countries how it's not just a question of how few Canadians are there. There are no Canadians there, with the exception of those that happen to be working with the United Nations or NGOs and things like that. But there's Australians there, Brits, Germans, Italians, French, Lebanese. And I think it's partly because we are living in a very comfortable neighborhood. Canada's economy is actually doing very, very well. Our defense industry is doing just fine. They go to the Paris Air Show, and they make the sales they need to make, and the profits are good. And so we're not under pressure to do that. But the good times may end. The neighborhood might not always be so good. The economy may, as we're seeing right now with the price of oil, may hit a few bumps. And we're going to be forced to go out there. But unfortunately, we're going to be the back of the line with all the other countries that are out there right now. So.
Well, the vast majority of private sector in Canada are small and medium enterprises. Right. They're not going to the Paris air shows. They're not accessing those markets in the same way as the big companies can. Right. Are there areas for policymakers in government to be doing things differently on behalf of those sectors?
You know, this is an issue I've really struggled with, both previously in the Foreign Service and the issue of how trade commissioners and the Department of Trade can assist. And in my current role, which or one of my current roles, which is I founded a charity called Building Markets, which assists small businesses in the developing world to get international contracts. And the paradox I face is that if you're a business that needs a trade commissioner from Gatineau to help you win a contract in Nigeria, you're probably not going to last long in Nigeria. You know, if you need to have your hand held by the government for you to win a contract, I think you're a lost cause already. And so you can lead, you know, they say you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. I think the Canadian government has done a very good job at trying to maximize all the resources that could be available to Canadian businesses to help them enter these markets. I can't imagine what more they could possibly do other than to grab them by the scruff of the neck and actually force march them to the airport.
Very good advice. I'm Martin Rust with the Security and Policy Institute for Professional Development here at the University of Ottawa. My guest today is Scott Gilmore, former diplomat and current columnist with Maclean's Magazine.